Guys, haven't seen you
Hi,
for ages.
Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to be starting now with the formalities. Welcome to everyone to the SAICE Railway and Harbour Division's presidential address this morning. Just some formalities for this morning's session. Firstly, some housekeeping. Can everyone please mute your mics and switch off cameras, except for the panel, the panelists that would be on presenting. We've got any questions as we go through will be addressed through the chat box, and the questions, we'll have a question and answer session at the end of all of the presentations. So please do not, we would not be accepting any voice type of questioning. It will just be anything that's in the chat box. And just to note, the session is recorded for upload onto the SAICE TV YouTube link. Okay, so for the program, okay, for those that do not know who I am, I'm Commissioner Reddy and I'm the chairman of the SAICE Railway and Harbours Division. The first presenter, Mr. Tshepo Kgobe, will present his topic on Transport Reimagined, the Future of Work. Thereafter, we will have a presentation by our SAICE CEO, Mr. Vishaal Lutchman, followed by our SAICE President, Mr. Fana Marutla. We've also allowed a little bit of time to allow acknowledgement and announcement of the John Brown Best Paper Award, and thereafter, like I've mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session where I'll address questions to the panelists from the viewers that have, that have got any questioning. So without further ado, I just wanted to introduce a biography of our speaker, Mr. Kgobe from the Gautrain. So just do that. Okay. Tshepo Kgobe is a seasoned senior executive who is also a certified project management professional and multidisciplinary engineer. He's with 21 years of extensive experience in managing complex projects and operations with diverse technical requirements in infrastructure, energy and mining. Tshepo has also had diverse positions that are not related to engineering, including BBBEE, Transformation and Corporate Social Investment. Tshepo is currently the Chief Operating Officer of the Gautrain Management Agency, the GMA, responsible for the everyday running of the agency. In his role, Tshepo is responsible for technical services, ICT and knowledge management, marketing and communication, risk management, legal and compliance services, corporate services, including human capital and facilities. In this role, Tshepo is responsible for the implementation in GMA. GMA is the agency that manages the concession agreement for the operation of the Gautrain on behalf of the Gauteng provincial government and is also responsible for the expansions and extensions of the system. I would like to welcome Mr. Kgobe. Welcome, Tshepo. Are you on?
Thank you, Commissioner.
Can you take us through your presentation? I hand over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, and thank you for SAICE for inviting me. Incidentally, this is almost about 15 years later that SAICE has invited me to speak. I thought I had done something wrong, but you were waiting for me to be a keynote speaker at one of your events. But let's get on with it. All protocol observed. I'd like to say good morning to the President of SAICE, Fana Marutla, and the CEO, Vishaal Lutchman, and all the esteemed guests, and all the old hands that I've seen today. If I could get on with it, when I was asked to speak, I thought, what could I add to an already existing dialogue in SAICE? And the question I asked was, are we ready as leadership to be able to embrace the change? Not the change that has only been brought on by COVID-19, but the change that is coming because of not only the fourth industrial revolution, but the change in our careers as a whole. If you meet anybody today and that have known me over the last 3-4 years, most of them actually do not know that I have a civil engineering degree. They assume that I am from the ICT sector. I have met a whole lot of people that think I'm the CIO of the company. And I have to remind them quickly that no, I still am an engineer as I have always been. And I'm comfortable with that. But it is because I had always tried to have my career evolve. The question I have for everybody on this call is, to the current existing leadership of the fraternity, are you ready to embrace change? And to the next aspirant leadership of the fraternity, are you ready to actually be able to take up your space as the people who are able to lead us into the next environment? And in doing so, I frame this leadership in the future of work. And as we look at this, there's a number of schemes. Now, I will look at the shapers of change. What is it that is in the air at the current moment that is creating these big changes? And secondly, I'll then look at how do we choose a higher purpose? You know, there is the shapers of change, and you could engage them in any way you want, but there is a need for us to be able to remap ourselves. And I think what COVID-19 has proved to us is that there is a challenge that exists, and we need to be able to look differently at how we go forward. And we have to look at the workforce of the future. What are the emerging trends, and what has come out of COVID-19, and what will continue on? And having looked at that, we'll say, how do we reimagine a better tomorrow? And then we'll look at leadership in the platform economy, because it is where we are, and there's nothing else you could do. And then I will then conclude beyond that. Now, what are the shapers of change? Is understanding the trends of the world around us. There's a big demographic change. Urbanization benefits people and businesses by increasing economic density. A worker in an economically dense area can commute more easily and consume a broader range of products. Firms cluster in cities and can access wider markets of inputs and buyers. And what that means is that you do not really need to still live where you work or work where you live. The ability to commute is going to be very big, which means transport is going to become one of those pieces of items that is no more a nice to have, but it is an essential need of our long-term existence. Now, digitization in itself, we've spoken so much about all of this. And I attended a conference in Durban, and in the conference, one of the important speakers about the 4IR at the current moment, one of the professors from VET, he says, Africa should not play the wrong role in this fourth industrial revolution. And I did ask him, what did he mean when he said Africa should not play the wrong role? Now we look at the first, second, and third industrial revolution. Africa gave stuff away. In the first industrial revolution, we gave people away. Slavery and our own human resource went to work and build other nations. In the second and third industrial revolutions, we gave minerals and mineral resources and capabilities. In the second one, coal was mined out of Africa to be able to power other countries and also other things. When automation started occurring at that point in time, then copper was the big resource that was extracted out of Africa. In the fourth industrial revolution, we are urging Africa not to play the wrong role. And in this, we're saying, if Africa fails to take a bold step to promote not just the digital access, but also access to the flow of goods, skills, services, and technologies, its countries will fall even behind more than it had fallen behind. And it is important that in digitization, Africa does not play the wrong role. Now, hyperconnectivity. And in essence, we are simply saying, look, it is a plus and a minus for us as a fraternity. As you're getting more hyperconnectivity, what you've seen in COVID-19 is very few of the companies that have gone to lockdown and have not returned to work are going to return fully to work. We've just opened up our office this week. There's only about 10 people out of the 110 people that work here. And we will gradually bring people back to the office, but we would never ever return to the office as it was. Now, what it means is that commuting will change. People will commute for different reasons, and buildings and the boom that we've seen in the last while will be impacted by the hyperconnectivity. But there will be other booms in the same building environment, which means at this point in time, in another conference, somebody says development will follow connectivity. Where the fiber goes, the development goes. And the fourth one is city resilience. And when you look at city resilience, the question that gets asked is, every city will live and die by its transport system. If you cannot get people quickly into a city or get them out quickly out of a city, that city will die and will die naturally so. But the question that has to be asked by us as what do they call it as a fraternity is, are we ready to understand the data that sits behind city resilience? And you know, resilience of cities, the resilient cities possess the ability to absorb, recover, reposition themselves to be better than they were prior to experiencing the shock. Are we ready to reimagine our cities and look at them in a completely different manner? And we are at the core of that. We cannot continue to build our way out of every shock that occurs. We're not going to be building as many more freeways as we were doing in the beginning. And we have to think differently at how do we contribute to city resilience. Now, ultimately, this is something that you cannot, and we as a nation cannot continue to allow to, we cannot allow to continue. The socio-economic polarization that is there, literally, I mean, this is reality. You literally can stand on top of one of these tall towers in the one picture and look across, and this is what you will see on the left-hand side of the picture at the current moment. It is, you know, abject poverty. And that abject poverty, long-term wise, will create a more unstable society. And as we build and change everything else, it's not about us building something, but also re-engineering society as a whole and making sure that Alex in itself changes and changes for the better, heal the wounds that have occurred over the years. And with those 5 items, we then says, how do we choose a higher purpose? A way in which we then say, could we be able to find a different world? But before we do exactly that and we choose the higher purpose, we have to recognize something that was brought forward. I think it was in a Deloitte report that said there will be 4 worlds that appear beyond the next industrial revolution. So the first world, and it's all about balance. Balance is key here. It's us as a human race that will choose in which direction we go. So the first world is innovation rules. And in that world, everybody is worried about, you know, automation. A lot of people will lose their jobs and all sorts of other things that are there. And that seems to be the world that we seem to be teetering towards before COVID-19 occurred. The next world that you look at is corporate is king. In this space, you know, we are ready to learn. Companies will retain the best employees that they have. Skills are going to be at the top of, but it is a world that we're coming from, and it's a world that has always been there, and that we've always known that the corporate does dictate to the world what happens. The fourth world that is there is the company cares. People will have stable jobs, long-term employment. It's a more of a socialistic future, technological future that we could imagine. But is that the world that will take us out of where we are. But COVID-19 has showed us that we have to think differently about where we're going and what will happen next. And we have to find a balance between corporate innovation rules and a company that cares. And then the fourth world that is there is the human comes first. And one of the first few things that you know is that the baby boomers and Gen X and how they looked at the world and how things have evolved, we have brought the world here. Now, the question is, could we ever find a world where the human comes first? Could we find a world in which technology develops without alienating? Could we find a world in which we democratize technology and allow the human being to still be central to what needs to happen? In any way, when you look at all of these worlds, they will all be there and occurring all at the same time. And that means is we have to find a better way of doing things. One of the key things that are coming out of COVID-19 is the question of what becomes of this world and how do we create this balance? Now, in essence, as we do that, the question we've asked as the Gautrain Management Agency is, could we find a better purpose for the company? Could we step away from the logic of a mission and a vision and be able to define our own purpose? And we have defined our purpose, and in the next few months, we will be revealing it to the world. But finding a purpose and finding a shared value is about us asking the question, could we actually be able to make money and change society while society feels that it's, and our stakeholders feel that they are also benefiting from what they do? Or they also feel they are managing to be able to get their lives going and manage to make money too. Could we actually run our companies in such a way that our stakeholders do not feel that we have taken more than they have gained? And that is an important consideration as we continue with the way to go forward. And therefore, we sort of, mathematically, with me and the CEO being both engineers, we always think in formula. So we have to actually be able to build up. We have a pressure for change. But the question you have to ask yourself, do you have a clear vision for that change? And then, do we have the capacity to change? But before we do that, do we have the actionable first step, which will then lead to the ultimate change itself? In certain cases, the pressure change is there. We have the capacity to change, but we do not have the clear vision for change. And what that does is it leads to a point where we're trying to think in big, broad terms. And we suffer from what's called fundamental attribution error. And fundamental attribution error, simply defined by Malcolm Gladwell, says it is the thought that a big change requires a big hit for you to be able to enable it. Whereas it is actually the small changes or the first actionable steps that will lead to the big change. Having spoken to that, we have to speak about the emerging trends. And with that emerging trends is what workforce demands are there in the future. Now, this is a recent study of 800 executives that were interviewed, probably I think between May and June, and the study was released in July. And what you'll see is the question they were asking is, what roles have increased? And the numbers at the top of these Manhattan Towers is they are questioning from the baseline of pre-COVID, by what percentage has more jobs being asked for in that space? So as you can see, health and safety in itself, it's 73%. It's only the nature of COVID and what has happened. But in itself, it just means the way you think as a civil engineer in and around safety has changed. It's no more a peripheral idea. It is actually a core of your job. And are we ready as a fraternity? And have we been developing? We have been developing more towards deep technical skills, but the world is asking us more for health and safety know-how that is deep and we have a more better understanding. And then there's technology and automation. When you look at it, is automation and artificial intelligence is big. And the question we ask from the slide is, has the fraternity been transforming? Have we been engaging universities to be able to start training civil engineers of the future that are coming out with that know-how and the capability to do these things. But more so, and that's a question I will ask as I continue with these slides, is the leadership ready to change? And is the leadership, we as both, what do they call it, the people that trained us, and us, the ones who are now in charge, able to embrace this thing? You know, digital customer experience, the Internet of Things. With us, we talk about the Internet of Transport, the cloud, cybersecurity, data analytics. Do any of our personal performance contracts in this year include all of these things, or are we still purely focused on developing the deep civil engineering skills? And if we do not change, people will come and eat our lunch, and people who have not been in the civil engineering fraternity will come through and dictate to us how we go forward. And in other ways, in the area of HR and digital learning, is a lot of our learning, as we are doing now, has moved online. And we are asking how we can hire people also online, and remotely be able to engage people as we bring on more people. And the big changes you can see on the bottom has come in health and safety. And the second level of changes come in technology and automation. And HR and digital learning are the big change in the demand. It does not mean you do not need civil engineers. It just means civil engineers need to think differently and how they do it. Now, also, in terms of digitization, some of the big things that are going to impact the industry is supply chain. And it's a big issue. We've just completed a full rehaul of the Gautrain Management Agency's supply chain, and we've built a supply chain portal where there will be no papers in this office, and all tenders are going to be fully online. And even the assessment of tenders will be fully online. It's not only about digitization, but it's also about curbing the corruption that goes with this, because in a digital platform, you have the tracking, you have the capability of changes that have been made to documents and that have been unlawfully been made into documents in the supply chain process. So there is a whole lot more layers that have been built into things like that. Then there's the digitization of customer challenge. How you engage your customer and how you deal with them, and you are able to bring your deliverables to the fore has changed quite heavily. And then there's the level of, what do they call it? 85% of companies are saying COVID-19 has accelerated their digital interaction, and their workforce is now, companies like Twitter and LinkedIn have decided that for the next year, all of their employees can work from home for the next 12 months. They're not going to renew some of their leases in their buildings. And what that means is that demand for new buildings is going to become a bit constrained. And we have to think differently about what role do we play as this change occurs. And then automation and artificial intelligence is a big part of how things are changing. And the question I still ask, it's not about the generation that comes after us. It's about us, those who are in charge, and those who have trained us, and still some of them are in charge. Are we ready to embrace the change that is occurring? Now, in essence, one of the things that is going to occur is that we need to look at our labor legislation. Our labor legislation, when I lived in England, and when I was still a young man, in 2000, in 99 and 2000, it was the norm to have just about probably 80% of the company being freelance workers and contractors, and people being called in to come and do work specifically on projects, and then they would leave. And we are still held together, as what they call it, as South Africa, in and around permanent jobs. And what this is showing is that more companies are moving towards contract workers and what's called gig workers. Gig workers is people who come in for a gig and then they leave after that. And they choose to live like that. And there are people who have made their careers all over the world in that sense. So therefore, we have to think about the scalability of our companies and how we do things. Now, this is one of those key things that we become very uncomfortable about when we start talking about it. It's the question of how can you remain in control of what's happening and be able to direct it without you being there everywhere. And this is about you building networks within your teams. So when you go from the left-hand side of the screen to the right-hand side, it is your teams need to evolve in such a way that in the first model, that's that typical command and control. Everything has to go back to the leadership before it goes back out into another team. And what that does is that the ability to communicate that we have slows down. And companies that will survive in the future are the ones that undo that sort of hierarchy. Now, the question that lies there again is leadership. Are you ready to let go? And as you let go, are you emotionally capable of being able to not have everything go through you before a decision gets made? And as you move on, you add the hub and spoke approach. And the hub and spoke approach, what it does is it creates additional new teams and sub-teams that have control on other teams that report back to leadership. But the hub and spoke approach itself still requires everything to go through, a lot more things to go through central before information can be spread out into the network. And as you continue with that and move on to the far right, what you get to be able to see is that the teams themselves start talking to each other. You create a network in the teams and in the ability for you to be able to get the teams to speak to each other and still keep you informed. So, and it's about you standing out of the way and allowing the teams, but remaining connected. I'm not saying you just go and sit on the beach and sip pina coladas. I'm just simply saying that you have to be comfortable with the fact that messaging and information will not all go through you. There will be information you're going to get after a process has occurred. And it's about us and transforming and having the emotional intelligence to be able to understand not everything needs to go through you. It's not about you anymore. It's about us getting as efficient as possible. And ultimately, who is this employee that is creating these problems where information no more goes through you as a person? So let's look at them. They require flexible working hours. We were having a conversation online with somebody, and I said to them, we've got kids to raise. Just because I don't show up at 6 o'clock in the morning in the office, that does not mean I'm not a team member. I'm not a team member. It's just the way I work. I prefer to be able to drop off my daughter at school, and they have different needs about how they engage with. But are we ready to be able to embrace that well? Increased access to information. Information has to be on their hands. Again, when you go back to the model I was showing you earlier on, if you allow the information to move by itself through your organization, it makes it easier for them to have information online. Needs constant feedback and learning. This one, even me, I'm not yet ready to keep on hugging everybody every time. Well done, you know. It's a logic that we've always worked, where you work through the job, it gets finished, and then you congratulate everybody at the end. It doesn't work like that with this generation. You have to always give constant feedback. In actual fact, somebody said in one of the papers that when I was doing this research, he said, when you don't give feedback, it seems like you hate them. And that's something we'll have to adapt to as well, as they have high technology proficiency. Now, this is a plus, is us being able to say, how do we harness this capability and know-how of the high technology proficiency? They have a passion for making a change. And a lot of them are environmentalists. And they do not work for anybody who do not embrace the change that has come through. And they want to make a change. And that is another positive, and that's an area that you have to work with. There's an increase for demand for variety of work. So they don't want to do the same thing over and over again. And what that means for organization, it's you're going to have a lot of non-formal arrangements. You have to create room for collaboration. You have to be able to create the networking for teams, which does not run through you. And they are self-led. And because they're self-led, that means the hierarchy of any organization, flattening your organization is going to be one of the most important things that you have to do immediately now. Now, reimagining a better tomorrow and a better way to lead. Now, these are the workforce trends that have come through, and how do you create networking of teams? So you have to, one, acknowledge the new behaviors, and which are shaped by social media and the web, and what is going on online. I'm not saying you should be on Instagram or on Facebook or any of these, but you need to be aware of what is going on in there. And there's a lot of trends that are occurring in there that will impact your company long-term wise. Second is technologies. Shift to cloud and collaboration technologies and big data and the Internet of Things is a big issue. And you have to understand that technology. Technology does not get led from IT. It gets led from the top. Your company will not go anywhere if you are not moving. The millennial workforce, we've spoken about them in the previous slide. New attitudes, new expectations, new ways of working, self-led people. And that is a big change. Mobility, work anytime, anywhere, on any device. We have to be comfortable with that. Just because you don't see a guy at his desk, it doesn't mean he's not working. And that is an important change, and we have to embrace that. And globalization and lack of boundaries is going to be a long-term trend. Now, in essence, as you look at your company, first and foremost, from the right, from the left, you're looking at, you're going to have to realign cost structures. And as you realign cost structures, then it will sharpen productivity. And sharpening productivity is not just going to occur. It is going to occur because you've embraced technology, you've embraced a new set of data sets, you've embraced a different way. And technology is not your tools. Technology is the broader framework and the platform that sits in and around your tools. And everything else that allows the information from the central point to then be available and accessible to anybody in the company. Create a digital enterprise. And as you create a digital enterprise, the first two things, and as they enhance, and then also embrace new revenue streams and prepare the workforce, and then strengthen your capital efficiency as you do that. So from the one end, you are realigning a cost structure to actually be able to strengthen your capital efficiency, how you use money and how you use your clients' money, because that is going to be a big part of how we do things. It's not just because you get to be given money. Somebody made a joke and he said, if you gave what do they call it? If you gave a farmer R1 million, what would he do? And the answer was he will farm until the money is finished. And engineers and engineering managers, we have been known to do that. To be able to say, if you gave an engineer R1 million, what is he going to do? He's going to engineer until the money is finished. And we have to move out of that world, have the data at our hands and the capability to actually strengthen the capital efficiency that we require. Now, having understood that, what are the things that we would have to adopt? First is you'd have to have the trust. You have to let go. For you to have trust, you'll have to let go. Anticipate and plan. We also have to embrace uncertainty in a way that is different. There's got to be a big shift in mindset. And then resilience is a way of being. It is about how you bounce back quickly. You can't be knocked and stay down. It's about the teams being able to see you that as a leader, you are able to pick up and go again, just like that. Now, as we do that, the question that we ask is, what are the leadership attributes that you require in the platform economy? In the economy where everything is highly networked, in the economy where it's not just about the tools, your CADs, your microstations and everything else, it's about information comes back together again to create a company that has information at its fingertips and have employees that are working in a digital world. Now, the question we asked as an entity was that, first and foremost, what lies at the center of what do they call it, of what we do? And ultimately, we came up with one reason. And when you look at the cycle on the one end is our people, their skills, and our committers themselves. And that is important. Our people, their capability, and what do they call it, and the customer we serve. In and around that, you have the future of mobility. It could be the future of the industry as a whole, and how do we look at it? But that is wrapped around by a data-driven platform economy. And data-driven platform economy, it means you have the substrate where all the tools that you have plug in to be able to allow your teams to have, and around that you have product-oriented entity, a product-oriented entity that is led by leadership, a leadership API that has the capability to be able to do what needs to happen. So, and as you can see, the apex stone or the keystone for this whole model is leadership and leadership capability as a whole. It's about reorganizing commercial markets that take structures away from the old enterprise model. So the old enterprise model is dying and dying and COVID has just obliterated it just like that. Why the platform economy? It's about increasing control on a global scale and then exceptional efficiency in the way you reorganize your activity. The new platform economy is about transforming business processes and the way people work. As a result, organizational leaders must develop strategies that harness and respond to this new platform business. Now, what do you need in terms of leadership characteristics? Direction and purpose. So, scouting an organization vision for customer centricity. The dependencies communicate the direction clearly and concretely as possible. Understand the capabilities and the resources, your stakeholders, your clients, and your competitors. So your employees and your customers, engage both employees and customers in your vision and your direction. Remember, I spoke to you about shared value. It's no more about your vision and your purpose being yours and being the rally point and sit somewhere in some document. It should be something that gets lived in the company, but you build a team that is aligned to the vision of the strategy. People have to buy into, it's no more good enough that somebody is good at what they do. That kind of employee is highly divisive when they do not believe in the brand. So you're good at what they do. So no, don't worry about him. He's one of our best engineers. But their attitude thinks. They have to buy in and align to the vision and the strategy of the company itself. You have to understand key capabilities of your resources also. Mobilize others to execute the vision, because it's no more about you doing it yourself. And the old way of doing things, if it's not getting done, I'm going to take it and do it. It's about you communicating and making sure that you create the focus areas and identify the measures that must be happened. And then the culture, embedding a culture of excellence and understanding of the customer. Celebrate small wins, communicate often and authentically. Continuing with the leadership characteristics themselves, it's about adapting, execution, and leading with digitization. And with leading with digitization is, as I said, it will come from the top. It's not going to come from the teams. This has to be, just like ISO and anything else that we've implemented in the past, it is anchored at the top rather than it being a movement that is rising among the teams. Adaptability. Digital leaders must be able to adapt to constant change and not fall behind, and which means you have to learn. You have to be able to re-educate yourself and be able to bring yourself up to speed to what happens. Implementation and be task driven. That is something we've always been good at but now it's about us focusing in with leading, understanding the context, the digital context of your business. Opportunities for automation, standardization, enhance customer engagement and experience. And then from then onwards, then look at how you collaborate, how you manage your talent, and how you ensure that there's feedback to and to your management teams themselves. So what capabilities do you need? You need to have drive. You need to drive digital and leverage technology to modernize the business strategy and operations. You have to navigate. You have to navigate a complex digital landscape. And again, I will bring it up again. Is the leadership ready, and is the leadership willing to embrace what happens next? Connect people with possibilities. And I love that phrase. Your role now is completely different. It's about you connecting people with possibilities in an increased and dispersed ecosystem that is driven and with information sometimes not moving through you, but moving through the teams. relate to others at a human level. One of the things that we've been accused of for years is that engineers have have a calculator for a heart. And that means we have that detachment. But in this new world, we actually have to bring the humanness of engineering in itself. Think differently. Focus on the holistic situation, understand and seeking creative and innovative possibilities that could be there. And in essence, as I conclude, one of the things that I will bring up without me belaboring this slide itself, it's what sits at the bottom of the slide. Move beyond doing digital via discrete technology implementations to being digital. Digital is not something that sits outside of your company culture. It is your company culture. The way you do things as a leader is going to be one of those things that then allow you to be able to accelerate the digital skills in your company. What you will have to do is foster a digital ecosystem for leaders and employees to thrive in. Eliminate centralized hierarchical processes and authority and empower employees. And that is a big change. So digitization here is not just about the technology. And it's about the mindset and changing in how you do things. Transformation of mindsets to focus on technical and the imaginative. So how do you empower people to do more things, better things, drive a culture of digitization in your company as a whole? Identify critical leadership roles and assess readiness of talent. And it has to be part of what you do when you look at the employee of the future and what they become and who becomes a leader. That person has to have a digital mindset in their space. And in conclusion, what do you have to do? First and foremost is you have to display deliberate calm and bounded optimism. There is nothing at the current moment that does not look right, like a leader that is completely frazzled and has issues and is not coping themselves. You're going to make the team panic itself. One of the things that have happened over the last few months and that have driven me nuts is the inability of people to make decisions. And the phrase, no, we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last, so we can't make the decision now. That is something that you have to set aside and start going. Demonstrate empathy and communicate effectively. One of the things that we have to bring to the fore is that the leadership in this fraternity have to be visible. You being, going down the rabbit hole on your spreadsheets and your tools on your desk is no more good enough. We have to see you in and around the organization. People are looking for leadership to be able to be there. Turbocharge self-organization. And turbocharging self-organization in itself requires you to let go. And it requires you to let go and allow the new leadership to start coming up and then being able to lead the organization in other ways than the ways we were used to. Champion radical transparency and authenticity. As you let go, what you have to enable is you enable information to filter itself back to you. And the two go hand in hand with each other. You can't let go when you do not have the ways of getting that information out of the company. That's the quickest way to do it. Get out of the way, but stay connected. The days where you had to do it yourself and tell everybody what to do are gone. Enable the new leadership generation to be able to do what it needs to do. And then launch teams fast and build as you go. You can't figure out everything to the nth degree. It is our thing as engineers. You want to have all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. Not in this world. In this world, you can't make decisions while you're still figuring out how to build a team. Become a digital leader and embrace change. And I think that's it from my end. Thank you.
Thank you, Tshepo, for that very informative presentation. I'm sure a lot of people would agree. You shared a lot of good insights as well. Thank you again. For our next presenter, that's our SAICE CEO, Mr. Vishaal Lutchman. Just some, background history on Vishaal. Vishaal is a leader with unprecedented engineering skills and business acumen. Prior to joining SAICE National Office, Vishaal was Divisional Director in Development, Transportation and Infrastructure at WSP Group Africa. He's graduated in 1999 from the University of Natal with a BSc in Engineering and registered professionally with EXA in 2005. He's pursued an MBA through the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2000 and recently obtained his Master's in Philosophy Leadership from the University of Johannesburg. Vishaal began his engineering career as Senior Engineer in Capital Projects at the Transnet National Ports Authority. He maintained executive roles in the 3 companies he worked for subsequently, namely SSI Engineers and Environmental Consultants as Head of Maritime Advisory and Strategy, Royal Haskoning GHV, where he served as the Director Advisory Group of International Business, Energy and Industrial, and WSP Group Africa. Vishaal's extensive industry experience encompasses project management, short and long-term strategy development, and risk management. He has also focused on integrating organizational strategy, operations, and technical capacity with future-fit leadership for the development of African solutions. As a result, he has been actively involved in guiding boards, industry players, and key clients in the development of infrastructure. Welcome, Vishaal. It's nice to have you with us at the Railway and Harbours division. Hand over to you to take us through your presentation.
Thank you, Chairperson. I take it you can see my slide, the landing slide.
Yes, we can see Vishaal, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you can hear me clearly?
Yes, we hear you perfectly, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, COO, Mr. Tshepo Kgobe. Very nice to share a platform with you again. I think we did that some years back, if I can remember correctly. Good morning, Mr. President, and again, all protocols observed. I feel very at home talking to this group for some reason. It could be related to the fact that my former career was with Transnet, and I spent many years learning and understanding and appreciating the business, and which has, in large played a role in who I am today. So thank you, and great to talk with some of the colleagues that I may or may not know from Transnet and the rest of the Railway and Harbours division. Welcome and good morning. The previous presentation was quite informing because it in some respects legitimized what I'm about to say, and it resonates very nicely with my presentation, and it was great to see because it gives some sort of credibility to perhaps what I'm trying to share with the branch, with the division today, as well as industry. So my presentation is going to talk about, again, reshaped perspectives to increase value to our members and the industry at large. Again, I tend to present in terms of providing perspectives for reflection. The way I'd like to go about it is to share some background, some purpose, and some of the new identifiers of how industry and members should identify with the institution, as well as the divisions and branches that form part of the institution. I'd like to embark on initiatives that make us critical thinkers as engineers on various topics in various parts of our industry, and become a solutionist and be identified as providing solutions rather than criticizing, for example. So a little bit around the background and introduction. The role of engineers in my short career, spanning some 20 years for now, has been ever evolving. So this is from my personal perspective. The engineer was the trusted advisor of a client, and to some extent is now seen as a commodity of services that is required. We are very heavily influenced by technology, which is a great tool to support efficient designs, but also risk obsolescence to some extent. The impact of speed in engineering gets one into a head-down mode of working, and we spoke about, I think the CEO did speak about that as well. So whilst doing this, we have uncertainty about our future, even more so by COVID-19 and what it's done to our society and our economy. Sustainability and longevity are conversations that I'm sure are playing out in your minds, your subconscious, in your families and your circles. How do we ensure or bring some kind of livelihoods? Monitoring performance within our businesses is ever increasing, and it's based on systems, processes, and procedures to comply with. And what I find is a lot of these are related to the need to control people, and sometimes could confuse one's purpose of why they are there. There's a lot of process regulation and compliance which is ever increasing, and to some extent I believe a lack of trust is generally part of the reason for why we overcomplicate some of the things that we do. Competencies and recruiting the right talent remains an elusive challenge. We find it difficult to recruit the right people for the right tasks that we have in our industry. And technology is another factor that, assuming we are technology integrators, we are highly dependent on technology. The exploding data concept, I think we've mentioned that before, and it's been explored to a large extent, but there are untapped opportunities. It comes with increased information that we can understand our operations a lot better, allowing us to change. Disconnectedness with our clients remains, however, and we seem to be held at an arm's length to some extent. Institutionalized silo mentality, and this is the way businesses are structured. This is the way this is the way our paradigms have been established. For example, we are talking about railway and harbors, but remember that we are part of a much bigger system, an economic system, a social system, and sometimes we forget that. There's a need to address mentoring, inequality, and economic participation, and I'll talk about that and how we integrate and some thoughts on how we make it, start to make it right. So how can we think differently and why? This is the purpose of this presentation. We need to add value to our members. I mean, we are a learned institution, and growing our members, growing the capacity to serve industry is part of our mandate. Adjusting SAICE's value proposition to new identifiers, in other words, the critical thinker and the solutionist, is something that we are embarking on as an institution, and I think some of the divisions would be already part of that discussion. In the end, we need to serve civil society as we are meant to do so. We need to do that sustainably and holistically. Okay, so the future of work attributes. We did speak a little bit, and I think the CEO mentioned about a few concepts around the future of work and teams. And I thought it's, and this is perhaps based on alternative theory, but very much resonating with what was already presented. Engineers and basically all workers going forward that are gonna work in whichever space, public, private, entrepreneurs and the like, will require these skills or attributes. Emotional intelligence is fundamental, and it's the future of all leaders are required to have this capability. This means that you need to learn about who you are and develop the skills that allow you to better connect with others, especially with communities as well. It requires self-awareness and development. Our appreciation and being able to connect gives hope for diversity and for us to share and be cognizant and have social intelligence. Once we are able to open our minds and have this emotional intelligence, we are able to understand other people and get the most of what we need from teams and the way they work, and understand the true value of embracing our differences and the power of diversity. I believe that we have regressed to some extent in exploiting the power of our diversity due to various factors. Living in a what-if world, it is how to think as a futurist. Once we have freed ourselves of existing paradigms that hold us back and perhaps skewer our view, we are able to release our ability to think forward. So learning and seeing how forces that are coming together and will give you insights and sort of a crystal ball gazing kind of opportunity in how you look at your business and the work at hand. Adaptive intelligence, I think the CEO has also presented on this, making sense of seeing patterns and complex decisions that need to be taken, understanding the full concept of, or the full all the constructs of a problem requires us to think a lot broader. Creativity and intuition are going to be some of the attributes leaders have to have so that you can almost think about how to collaborate with the technology so that it doesn't become fearful for us to embrace the various technology solutions coming our way. Developing skills of how to ask good questions, and that is something perhaps more difficult for a computer to do. We need to also be able to understand how do we deal with two wrong answers. Something again that the computer needs to spend a lot of time learning how to differentiate between the two. So there is an intangible component of leadership that sometimes cannot be easily automated just yet. And not to say it won't, but for now at least we have a chance of still winning that battle. Innovation. How do we make more proactive? How do we become more proactive? Take more risks, experiment and celebrate. To a large extent, we are very critical of those that have failed, not realizing that failure does bring learning, as much as we might tell it in other circles, but allowing one to feel safe to fail is what allows growth and learning to happen. And often our punitive approach to failure has discouraged one to even try. Being tech savvy, I think that's standalone and it's well appreciated and well explored already. So in terms of a new identity, as we provide infrastructure, we have to balance the following. Else, in my opinion, there will not be sustainability. The social dynamics can no longer be a talking point. Understanding the dynamics of various kinds, cultures, understanding migration plays a big role in this discussion because we are talking moving of people, we're talking about moving of freight and transportation overall. Understanding how families, communities operate, and why is trust collapsing when we have this beautiful country of ours. There are many countries in turmoil, but I still believe we have the greatest hope of turning things around should we choose to. Geopolitical systems, understanding the politics of our surroundings, understanding the politics of the day, understanding how we partner with our trading partners does play a big role in this discussion when it comes to rail and port type of businesses. The understanding how the dynamics of power changes trade, how rapid change affects our business and opportunities therein do create opportunities for us to seize the day. Understanding earth sciences is paramount. It really relates to the survival of humankind and how does that influence the work that we are doing. So studying climate change, interactive nature of climate with the society, the physical systems, and these are to a large extent not within the control of any single geography, but it's a global type of discussion. The techno-economic is what brings financial sustainability, and technology is ever growing and improving. So economics has to be understood. These fundamentals need to be applied if we are to bring into control some of our budget deficit issues and how we spend our money. We really need to put effort into top line growth. And I think when we talk about rail and port and these kind of discussions, they have a large role to play. So from a SAICE perspective, we need to be seen to provide solutions into how we link infrastructure build opportunities henceforth to meaningfully progress towards sustainability by addressing inequality. And that was quite in bold because it's a statement of intent of what the institution should be identified with. In terms of being a critical thinker, development strategy can no longer remain a wish list. For far too long, we talk a lot about plans. However, when the crisis hits, we get scatterbrained. So projects need to be scrubbed to be exposed for true feasibility and no longer talk shops or motivated by single agendas. Balance has to be the goal going forward. And when I talk about balance, I talk about the idea of those 4 bullet points previously. So I wanted to put the point out, who thinks Kucha Port was the great idea to be done at the time when it was? And it's a personal question from my side because I was part of doing the engineering, part of doing the construction and commissioning of that port. So why can we not do that again when we really need investment? And that's the question. We don't have a post-mining economy solution. And in my opinion, we need one for sure. A lot of our economy is based on mining, and do we need to transform that, because there is a time coming when we will not have a lot of the product we talk about. The project investment pipeline has to fit the procurement model. In other words, many projects are using the wrong procurement model to be implemented. And there are many options, and we tend to take the safe route, which is do what we only know how to do. Concession models need to be explored, but for now may have little chance of success. We need to know what defines success in such concession models, and they really vary between each transaction, and they vary between each type of industry. So there's many moving targets when we talk about concession models, and they're not as straightforward as one might think it would be. We continue to deny the SADC integrated planning agenda. Up till today, I'm still seeing projects that are skewed from an integrated planning agenda, and we're not doing enough work from a regional perspective to integrate infrastructure planning, notwithstanding we have the migration phenomenon still playing out. The road to rail strategy, for as long as I was with Transnet, there was this concept, and in my opinion, if there is will to fix it, there's an opportunity to get it right. For now, too many stakeholders have drawn the line in the sand, deeming knowledge of feasibility of concepts, but as a collective, when we put collective goals on the table, I think the discussion becomes very different. Our future trading partners pose sustainability risk to us, and we need to diversify trade with expansionary intentions. In other words, look regionally as well. We have historic trading partners, and we are not exploiting the regional discussion fast enough to create opportunity for trade and growth. So innovation, my question is, whatever happened to that? Innovation was a talking point many years ago, but has seemed to have waned over time. And that's because perhaps we have this head down syndrome. Industrialization has to be made sustainable. Reforms and levels of protection are required, and perhaps I'm becoming a bit more socialist or even communist to some extent, but as borders are closing, we really need to look after our own. So if there's requirements that we need to protect certain markets, I think it's a discussion that needs to be had. Others are doing it actively anyway. So we are so used to crisis management that that there may be some of us that don't actually know what it is to be calm, what it is to stop and think before we do. We cannot control and influence many things any longer, and I call it the hamster wheel of life. But we can do much as a learned body of engineers that think and care about the industry and its future. So in terms of the solutionist, how do you do this? How do you provide solutions? It starts with one. Be the change you want to see in the country. Live the values in all that you do. Defining your purpose in obtaining gratification from serving others. It's a paradox, funnily enough. The more you give, the more you get. You probably heard this before. So working smart and hard, we really need to be active as individuals. Stand for something and make sure all know about it. Apathy will not assist in any form any longer. Always encourage others to think what if, and it's a great question to start a discussion on a topic. We need to get big data discussions going, and we need to exploit the opportunities that it presents. We do have the technology to solve many problems, especially in logistics and transport systems. There's a lot of work to be done generally in this country and in our environment and in our industry, and it can be made light work if we do it as a collective. There's far too many fragmented approaches, different positionings, digging your heels in, and all of these kind of dynamics that stop us from working as a collective. With no time wasting, as we know what has to be done. We are fragmented due to politics and other force majeure type of events. Embracing technology to avert irregularities. I saw that point in the COO's slide. It's a major shortcoming in South Africa and the world overall, funnily enough. Become compliance orientated as an industry. The construction sector, as I've been told by the National Police Commissioner, is the most corrupt sector in the country and in the world. So that means we need to start looking at our own businesses and our own industry before we can start talking about how others should change. So possible division focus areas in terms of providing solutions. There's always the need to integrate regionally. How do we do that? Passenger and freight migrate, and why I say that is because migration is real, and it's getting more so, driven by economics and climate change. So if we are able to support our region in terms of development nodes, in terms of cross-border initiatives that bring benefit to different countries or systems, we can to some extent mitigate the need for the rate of migration that is currently on the go, because it places burdens on some cities whilst leaving other areas devoid of activities. South Africa needs an implementation plan to create real growth in our economy, and this industry of railway and harbours has the opportunity to do so. We have many plans, but not much more than that. The post-mining economic focus, what should that be? I don't think we know what the answers are. And I talk about countries or the regions like the United Arab Emirates, who long time ago realized that oil was not going to be their safe space and transformed it into a tourism financial hub, for example. It's that kind of example that I asked the question here. What are we going to change from mining? There is talk about fundamental structural reforms required in the existing economy, but should we know what the new economy can look like, we could already have the embedded fundamentals in that economy. The transition to a freight light economy, in keeping with the technology and industrialization discussion, I know it might fall foul of perhaps my Transnet colleagues who like carrying heavy stuff on railway lines, but if we talk industrialization, we talk about lighter weight volumes, and with uneven recoveries in trade flows currently, I'm sure there's existing initiatives that can be exploited on how to recover some of that market share. The globalization of supply chains and the flux therein also brings untapped opportunities for us as a country. We have transport systems, but not connected to value-adding industrial development nodes. And how do we do that, and what should those nodes look like? There is some discussions about agri-processing, for example, and how can transport systems connect these to make them viable? These new integrated plans have to be balanced. Social needs, politics, the earth, technical and economics. How do we do that? There are models available, but I don't think they've been exploited to that extent. It can be, however, covered in a new implementation approach. What are the newer technologies? Exploitation of the rise of e-commerce in logistics. I saw the CEO also mention this about being paperless, and this can go a long way in keeping our businesses a lot more efficient. Incorporating clean energies in freight systems to reduce climate impacts is another topic that the division could focus on. Education in the rail sector with regard to planning of new capacities, understanding of operations and how operations influences new capacities, understanding safety. Service levels are very important. I think even from a metro or a PRASA perspective, that would be something that would matter a lot to them. And asset maintenance, which is something that is not happening enough as we would like it to happen. Capacitating the freight and passenger sector in terms of public and private sectors, we need to solve these problems ourselves. So in other words, the capacity that is required to be available within the various sectors, we really need to jump into the deep end. I don't think we should wait for others to solve that kind of problem. And the last point is the NatCore discussion with respect to capacity should be really activated. We had very good forums working in the past, and that is basically the lifeline to the economy of this country. Now is the right time to get the right projects agreed to, as we have an economic crisis and there's no time to waste. So how can we make the best use of this crisis? Allows one to perhaps even get decisions made that wouldn't ordinarily get made when things are a lot calmer. So in conclusion, my parting slide, as you would have seen for those who have seen this, seen me present in the past, please always live the values and learn with meaning. Think society in all that you are doing. Seek to always help and capacitate those on the journey with you, and remember that our strength lies in our diversity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vishaal, for sharing those insights with us. I think there were a lot of interesting perspectives from your side, especially with regards to our economy and where we could look at improvements. And I think, even on the rail and port sites, which is very relevant to what our division stands for. So there were a lot of valid points that you raised there. So thank you again for that. Our next speaker, presenter, is our keynote speaker, Mr. Fana Marutla, who's president of SAICE 2020. I would just want to read a little background of Fana before he can proceed with the presentation. Fana's graduated with the BSc Civil Engineering from WITS. He's further, studied a postgraduate MSc Engineering Civil through WITS, and he's also, obtained an MBL through UNISA. Fana is a registered professional civil engineer with consulting, railway engineering and construction-related experience spanning 23 years. His area of expertise comprehends railway engineering, rail infrastructure maintenance, contract and construction management. He's worked for Transnet Freight Rail in various capacities for 17 years before joining GIB Engineering and Architecture in 2014. His affiliations and memberships, professional engineer in 2005, current president of SAICE, executive board chairperson and fellow SAICE, advisory board member, Department of Civil Engineering, University of Johannesburg, advisory board member, Department of Civil Engineering, University of Pretoria, board member, South African Heavy Haul Association. So welcome, Fana. Thank you. We are privileged to have you here, as part of our Railway and Harbours division, address this morning. I hand over to you to take us through your presentation.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for that intro. I'm much more comfortable for a change today to be speaking to my colleagues in the railway space, the language that I understand much better. And so much so after the wonderful presentations of our COO, Tshepo, who talked about the workforce of the future, the Internet of Transport, and also the concept of freelance working in our industries. And this is something that I'm going to be talking about as well in my own presentation. And of course, Vishaal talked about the solutionist and the critical thinker, which is some of the things that we need to do for our country. So in terms of the content for my presentation, I will cover an overview of my presidential theme for the year, and cover some of the social issues and economic issues that we face as a country at the moment. And one of the solutions which I'm going to be proposing is to rebuild our institutions in our nation. I'll touch on education, something that is a big challenge for us this year in particular. Last year when I was talking about my theme, little could I have predicted that this year is going to be a very difficult year for the nation and for the world at large in terms of the education in relation to the pandemic that has befallen the world. And I'll touch again on youth entrepreneurship. This one in particular, I'll be touching on some of the issues that the Tshepo mentioned in his presentation as well, because this is going to be an important area that we need to focus on as a nation going forward in our country. I'll also then touch on ethical leadership, something very, very important, and then I'll conclude at the end. Just to refresh some of the people that may not have seen my theme, my presidential theme was focusing on 4 pillars, basically the one being education, youth entrepreneurship, procurement, a big challenge in our country at the moment, leadership, and these 4 pillars are underpinned by governance, corporate governance and ethics. So if we are to do to get this country in a better trajectory, this is some of the things that we need to get right as a nation. And I'm talking about this, I'm writing papers about it, and I'm talking about them at every forum where I'm given an opportunity. If you read the SAICE magazines every month, I write an opinion piece about any one of these topics, and that is important for us to engage on those ones as well. Okay, touching a bit on the social issues in our country, I think we all are aware of the COVID-19 pandemic, what it has done, the havoc it has wreaked around the world, and that has not spared our own country as well. But the point I want to make on this slide is, this pandemic, it also presents us with opportunities for us to think out of the box, to come with relevant economic policies that will take our nation forward. We talk a lot about skills shortages in our country. And if you can remember, on the 9th of August this year, the president announced that our government is planning to put aside 40% of public procurement on women-owned companies. And that for me is one of the radical policies that we can actually, embrace as a nation and think more about others as well. To say, where can we go as a nation? I'll talk a bit more now about the unemployment rate in our country, but we need to think more about, what are the things that we must do as a nation? What are the policies that we must put together as a nation to try and take this country forward, like this particular announcement by the president? We need more kind of out of the box thinking in relation to where we want to go as a nation. Another thing is some of the challenges, the social issues we have. Put this slide, and as I was putting this slide, I was just pausing for a moment and saying, what is happening around us as a country? I think for those of us who are in the railways, who have been involved in construction of railway lines, we know how much it costs to build the railway lines, and when we see the pilage of infrastructure around our country, it poses a question to say, what is happening around us? How can we solve problems by creating another problems? We seem to be taking 2 steps forward, but at the same time, we take 3 steps backward. And as a result, we don't seem to be moving forward. In this picture here, someone is damaging a road, and they're doing that because they say they're not being heard. They want service delivery because the issues they have, they are not being listened to. And that is not the way to go. We don't solve problems by creating another problems. And that's just the reality that we face as a nation at the moment. And we need to, again, do all we can to prevent this thing from happening. Something again that I talk a lot about is the performance of our economy since 1994. If you look at the GDP in the last 26 years, you will see that the trend of economic growth is actually downward. The slope is negative, and I'm just saying that and what must we do to get things right? And I want to just zoom into a specific period in this number of years to say, when did we do things right, and why can't we do things right like we used to do before? And if you look, for example, at the year 2006, you will see that the economy was growing at a rate of 5.6%. That was a good year for us as a nation. Which is why the National Development Plan, when it talks about the best economic growth rate in its plan for 2030, the best case scenario is for the economy to be growing at a rate of 5.4%, which is why I've plotted top, which is what I call the what if path, meaning that I'm asking a question: what if the economy had grown in this way? What if everything remained at the level of 5% year on year, the growth of our economy? Even if it is not that high, at least at the rate of 3%, 3% will still make a huge difference in our economy. But as things stand, as we have had, the Statistics South Africa announced a week ago that the unemployment rate in Q2 of 2020 has dropped. It looks like an improvement, but it's actually not. The current rate that they've measured in the last quarter is 23.3%, while in the first quarter of this year, the unemployment rate was 30.1%. So it looks like it's an improvement, but it's a false improvement in the sense that, when you define the unemployment rate, you are talking about people who are actively looking for a job in the last 3 months of the measurement cycle. But we do know in our country that in the last 3 months of the measurement cycle, people were at home, they were not looking for jobs, they were not active. And as a result, they don't qualify in the definition of unemployment. So that group of people then are lumped in what is called the expanded definition of unemployment, which has now gone higher to a rate of 42%. It was about 39% in the first quarter of the year, but it has actually gone higher to 42%. So in the real sense, if we talk about what is happening in our economy, the unemployment rate has gone much worse than where it was before. And then asking, what must we do to get our economy right? I mean, if you look at the year again, the 2006, the unemployment rate then was about 22.6%. It was also high as well when you compare it to the best case, which was 1995, when it was 16.9%. So I'm just saying that, we have to find ways, to get our economy to where it should be, where we can get the unemployment rate to the lowest level possible for our nation. I think we need to get our people employed if we are to be the rainbow nation that we are called around the world. Again, something I want to touch a bit on is our own local economy. If you look at the revenue, which is the tax that we collect as a nation, compared to the expenditure, just in the latter part of this 26-year period, you will see that the two lines are diverging. They are moving away from each other. The expenditure is going higher, whereas the revenue or the tax that is collected is actually being reduced. So the idea is, the amount of money that you collect, the amount of income that you earn as a country should ideally match the expenditure that you have, which was more or less the case. If you look at the years 2006, 2007, you will see the two lines were much closer to each other. And this is the kind of environment where you would like to be, where the tax or the income that you earn as a country kind of matches the expenditures that the country has. You will recall from the announcement by the Minister of Finance in his budget speech in June this year, that the expected shortfall for this year is somewhere in the order of 304 billion rands by the end of this year. And that is a lot of money, for any country by any measure. We do understand the reasoning for the increases in expenses because a lot of them are related to the COVID-19 initiatives. However, it is still a very, very high shortfall for any country. So we need to find solutions in terms of us getting out of this situation that we find ourselves. The next slide just talks about the comparison of two components of the income that we earn as a country. There are various other elements, but in this slide, I'm just talking about the two elements, the household or the individuals which contribute to the tax, and also the companies. And you will see that from 1995 up until now, the government reliance on income has largely been coming to us as individuals. It has been coming to us as households, which for me means that we need to find ways to create more employment for people, because when more people are employed, then we're able to have more income. We're able to, the country is able to, collect more revenue for the needs of the country. And over the years, as you can see, the taxes that coming from companies has been lower compared to the households. So let's find ways to create more employment for individuals or households. And again, the more people are employed, and then the more the companies themselves will be able to earn more income as well, and therefore there will be more tax to be paid to the fiscus. So it is important for us to find ways to create employment for our country, for the benefit of individuals, for the benefit of the companies themselves, and again for the benefit of our nation in terms of service delivery. So we need to find solutions for that. Now, if you look at the fiscus, what the government says they are planning to do for the next three, what they call the medium-term period, you will see that in the next 3 years, the government is planning to spend about 1.2 trillion rands on learning and culture, the bar at the bottom. That is education. So the government plans to spend 1.2 trillion rands over the 3-year cycle on learning and culture. The next line there is social development to try and alleviate poverty in our country. The government is planning to spend 170 billion rands over this 3-year cycle, followed by the third line there, which is the debt service cost, where the government is planning to spend 778 billion rands. Now, I put this this number in red because it's a bit of a concern to say that we're spending a lot of money on servicing debt. The reasons may be good, but it's something that we need to watch very closely. If you compare this line with the next one, which is the budget for health, you will see that we're spending more money on servicing debt than what we spend on our health system in the country. So the budget for servicing debt is higher than even the budget for our health system. So that is a concern, and it's something that we need to find innovative ways of trying to minimize going forward. Because we're creating more debt that is going to take us many years for us to repay to our lenders. So I'm just highlighting this to say we need to find ways to minimize the level of debt that we are, we are earning as a nation. In this slide, I'm just comparing, our country with other countries around. And I'm asking the question being that, if you compare our country, South Africa, with other countries around the world, in terms of how we manage our economies, where would one plot South Africa if one were to draw a scale of 1 to 10? If I'm saying on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you plot our country, South Africa, in terms of how we manage our economy? As I mentioned earlier, that the deficit that has been announced by our government is going to be in the order of 304 billion rands. And I've just mentioned that the expanded unemployment rate has increased to 42%. And as you can remember, around April this year, Moody and Fitch downgraded our country to sub-investment levels. And the National Treasury have announced that the national borrowing, the national debt, is going to increase to about 82% of our GDP, which is going to be a figure in the order of 4 trillion rands. And that is a lot of money. So I'm then asking a question, and I want you guys to think about it as well, to say, where can you plot our country on a scale of 1 to 10, which is what I'm putting before you. So I'm saying that comparatively speaking, if we are to assume and say maybe the US and the UK, we put them at number 1. They are not necessarily the best in the world, but I'm just saying comparatively speaking with us, they are doing relatively better. And I'm saying at number 10, I'm proposing that I put Mexico at number 10. And the reason for my using Mexico as an example is that, if you speak to any businessman, any entrepreneur in Mexico, they will tell you that, most of them, they say about 60% of entrepreneurs or businessmen in Mexico, they believe that corruption is the normal way of doing business. There's nothing untoward about corruption. 60% of business people in Mexico believe that corruption is normal. And I'm acknowledging here that Mexico's economy is about 3 times our size. So it's 3 times bigger than our country. But, they say, if you read about it, they say that between 2 and 10% of their GDP is lost to corruption. And as if that is not enough, they say that, for the cases that goes to court, the corruption cases that goes to court, only 20% of them succeed. In other words, they end up in guilty verdict for those who are involved. The rest, the other 80% of them, they fall by the wayside. People are not found guilty, irrespective of the amount of evidence that was there. People find ways, whether they bribe the legal system or whatever it is, but they succeed. About 80% of the cases that goes to court in Mexico, do not end in guilty verdict. And they compare that with the US, where about 90% of the cases that goes to court involving corruption succeed. People are found guilty. So my proposal then is that, I would like to propose that South Africa will be somewhere in between at number 5 on this scale. And this number 5 is a state called a fallen angel state. If you read about the investment markets, the bond markets, they talk about something called a fallen angel state, which actually means that our country used to be at a stage which was recognized around the world. We used to be respected to some degree but that respect has reduced a bit. We are below the sub-investment level at the moment. And this is something that as a nation we need to find solution for. We need to get to where we used to be. We need to develop our country and find better solution. And we need to think out of the box. I think that is the message that I want to drive across on this slide. Now, I'm then asking the question, what must we then do for us to, to get back to where we used to be, to be a better country that is well respected around the world? And I want to borrow from the words of Dr. Cheryl Martin. For those of you who attended the International Heavy Haul Association Conference in Cape Town in 2017, they may remember the speech of Cheryl Martin, who was at the time a board member of the World Economic Forum. And this is what she said at the conference in her keynote address. She said that we have 21st century technologies being managed with 20th century thinking by 19th century institutions. And when she said that, I thought a bit and said, this is it. And this is exactly the case. We have the best technologies in the world. We're talking about the 4IR. We're talking about the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Transport, as the CEO mentioned earlier. But we still have our institutions which are still far behind in terms of their performance, in terms of how they're structured, in terms of the cultures and the values that they are living. So we need to find solution to rebuild our institutions. So with that, I'm saying that I'm still very positive that if we can rebuild the institutions that we have, we can still have a better country. We can still see the light at the end of the tunnel. We still have the prospect of a better country, but it's up to us to do something about it. We must, work together, put all the hands on deck, and work for a better country as a nation. And one of the things that we can do is to fix, for example, our municipalities and some of the SOEs as well. If you look at some of the municipalities around our country, you will see that, for example, if you look at technical departments, some of these departments, they are technical by design, they are technical by nature, they are running technical systems, they are running projects, but people who are managing them are not trained in those fields. They are not engineers, they are not technologists, they are not technicians trained to run these facilities. And these are the people who are supposed to be delivering the infrastructure, the services that our nation requires. So I'm saying that, we need to, rebuild municipalities as well. There's a new approach that the government is talking about, where they want to rationalize how the municipalities are working. Even with that, we need to make sure that the people who are running technical departments are people who are skilled in those fields, people who understand technologies, people who understand technical knowledge of how to run projects. Now, the technical knowledge I'm talking about as an example, using this example of the project life cycle. If you talk to the Project Management Institute, the PLP, which is a Transnet language, and the EPCM models. Now, these cycles which are involved in any project, where you talk about the initiation, the planning, the execution, control, monitoring, and the closure of a project. This kind of language, people need to be trained in it for them to understand it. It's not something that any person or a politician, someone who is not trained in the field, will be able to understand it. They will need to be trained to understand how projects are run. So we need to work with them. But I think politicians as well, they need to let technical people, in my example, to run technical departments. So we need to work closely together for the betterment of our own country. So this is the language that is best understood by people who are trained in the field. Something again that is also very important is the maintenance of our infrastructure. A lot of us, a lot of times we talk about the planning, the design, and the construction of new infrastructure, and this is the kind of space that attracts more attention. Attention like where you invite prominent people to cut the ribbon because a new infrastructure has been provided, a new school or a new road or a new dam has been built, and it becomes a celebrated achievement for the nation, and that is important. But it's not the only important thing. There are other important things as well. The maintenance of that infrastructure once it has been commissioned. You will see in this slide that if you look at the total life cycle cost of any asset, you know, the operation and maintenance of that asset, those costs, they range somewhere in the order of 60 to 80%. So it is not something that should be underestimated. It is important that we focus on maintenance. We don't underestimate the importance of it. Yes, it is important to make sure that whatever we plan, whatever we design and construct, it's done to the highest quality possible. We should do that. However, let's also take maintenance into account as well. I just want to move a bit and focus on education, something equally very important as a nation. And I want to use the example of the matric results of last year, 2019. If you look at the red text at the top of the slide, you will see that, you know, in terms of the results that the Department of Basic Education announced, they indicated that of all the learners that wrote matric last year, 170,000 of them were able to get bachelor admissions at universities. Now, if you compare that with the requirement of the National Development Plan, the National Development Plan target for 2019 was 270,000 learners. So they were saying that, you know, by 2019 we should be having 270,000 learners being admitted to universities for bachelor degrees. Now, if you compare the plan and the actual, you see that there's a gap of 100,000 learners. Now, if you fast forward to that and say, what is the plan saying? The plan says by 2030, that number should have grown to 435. So you can see that if you compare where we are now in terms of the plan and where we want to be in about 9-10 years time, you know, so much must be done to try and get these numbers right if we are to achieve the plan by 2030. Now, if I move on to the next one again, I just want to talk about maths. Learners in our schools, the grade 12 learners who are doing maths at schools, you will see here that, you know, only 20% of them pass maths at marks which are greater than 50%. 20% of our learners pass maths properly, if one can put it that way, at more than 50% pass mark. Now, for me, 20% is a very low number. So much must be done by us as engineers, by us in the technical environment. So what I'm also then saying is that I want to challenge us and say, if for whatever reason, if you ever have a space in your time, whether it's after hours, whether it's during the weekend, if there's one learner that you can mentor and, you know, and help in terms of teaching them maths, you know, let's do so, because if we do that, we can help our nation to improve the level at which our learners are passing maths at our schools. So I'm challenging all of us to make time, you know, find time in our own busy schedule and help one learner. That one learner, it will make a difference in the bigger scheme of things. Now, something I want to also mention, I did mention earlier that our president announced that, you know, 40% of public procurement is going to be set aside for women-owned companies. And I want to just reflect a bit on the stats that are coming out of EXA. Now, if you look at EXA, you know, the STEM fields, but I want to use EXA as an example. If you look at the annual report of EXA for 2018-2019, the report says that the number of people who are registered in their database were about 58,000. Now, if you ask the question to say, out of these 58,000, how many of them are female? You will see that, you know, in terms of the PRNGs, we have about 21,000, just over 21,000 of them who are PRNG, and over 6,000 who are professional technologists. But now, if you look at the female representation, you will see that in the professional engineering category, 5% of those people who are registered as professional engineers are female. And 7.4% in this category of technologists are female, 7.4%, and that is a very low number. And if you look at all the categories, you will see that, you know, the female representation is very low. In all the categories, the actual number in terms of the 2018-19 annual report was sitting at 6.75%. This number is less than 10%. Now, the question then is, you know, if our government has set aside 40% of public procurement to women-owned companies, you know, how are we going to achieve that in our own space, in our own industry as engineers, where the representation is very low? So it's a challenge that I'm putting forward, that I'm putting to every one of us to say, something must be done. We need to find ways to help our government to try and find a middle ground solution, where we can have more and more of women representation in our industry as well. Yeah, now I want to touch on youth entrepreneurship, as I mentioned earlier in the intro. This is a big challenge in our country at the moment. The COO mentioned that the workforce of the future, they've got different value systems to the one that we have. They're asking different questions to the one that we used to have. And we need to find solutions. We need to talk to those new values that they have. We talk about 4IR, the Internet of Things or Internet of Transport, AI, the 5G networks. Now, with these technologies, we need to use them to try and reduce this high unemployment rate of 42% if you talk about the expanded definition. So we need to find innovative ways to create employment for our young people. Most of these people who are unemployed are young people. So let's find solutions to create more jobs for them. And my belief is that if we can do that, if we can find ways to drop this high unemployment rate, we will plant a seed on our continent. We will do something that this continent wants, not just our country, the continent as a whole. We can add value to our continent as engineers. So let's start by doing something through empowering our own youth, by studying including studying their own companies. The CEO mentioned the contract workers, what is also called freelancers or gig workers. This is something we must think about, because that is the future. That is where we are going, where people are working for themselves, not working for big organizations like Eskom or Transnet, or other big organizations as well. So we need to find ways of, encouraging young people in particular to say, working for big organizations, is no longer the same. The current culture is not the same as it is used to be. Things have changed a bit. So we must encourage youth entrepreneurship as a way of finding solution for this high unemployment rate in our own country. And I believe if we can, do that, we can start moving in the right direction. And this high unemployment rate of 30 or 42% will come down one way or the other. Now, let me conclude. I want to conclude by talking about ethical leadership. This is a big challenge as well in our own country. And I want to borrow from the words of two prominent people that we all know of, who have departed this planet this year. We have lost these two struggle icons this year. The first one being Andrew Mlangen, who passed on in July this year. Now, this is what he said about ethical leadership. Now, he said that in judging our progress as individuals, we tend to concentrate on external factors such as one's own social position, influence and popularity, wealth and standard of education, but internal factors may even be more crucial in assessing one's development as a human being. And these are honesty, sincerity, simplicity, humility, purity, generosity, absence of vanity, and the readiness to serve your fellow men. So Andrew here was talking about, the importance of being honest, the importance of being sincere, the importance of humility, embracing that we need to serve our nation in an honest manner possible. Not just think about your own individual pockets or stomachs, which has been the case that we have observed in our nation in so many years. And the other struggle icon, Dennis Goldberg, said that we fought apartheid because the resources and the valuable minerals and the lives of our people were stolen by apartheid. And now we are stealing the very valuable things that our very constitutions is supposed to defend. So we actually, not supporting our own constitution even. People are stealing things that they're not supposed to be stealing, which the constitution is supposed to protect. So with this thing, I'm saying that let's embrace ethical leadership as leaders in our own space. It is important for us to do things ethically, because in so doing, When the sun sets, you know that you're going to sleep very well as a leader in your own space. Now, in conclusion, just talking about the code of ethics and code of conduct, I just want to quote from one of the former US president, Herbert Hoover, who was in a very similar position like myself. Herbert was the engineer president of the American Institute of Mining Engineers and also of the former Federated American Engineer Societies. Now, in his memoirs, this is what he said about the liabilities of engineering. He said that the great liability of the engineer compared to men of other professions is that his works are out in the open where all can see them. His acts step by step are in hard substance. He cannot bury his mistakes in the grave like doctors do. He cannot argue them into thin air or blame the judge like the lawyers do. He cannot, like the architects, cover his failures with trees. He cannot, like the politicians, screen his shortcomings by blaming the opposition and hope that the people will forget. The engineer simply cannot deny that he did it. If his works do not work, he is damned. That is what Herbert Hoover said. So with that, Chairperson, I just want to encourage us to support and practice our code of ethics, our code of conduct, which actually govern our decision making and our behavior and actions respectively. I think it is important for us as engineers to do that. With that, I would like to thank you, Chair, to present to my colleagues in the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marutla. That has been a very, very informative presentation. You provided a lot of valuable insights raised on, socio-economic challenges, ethical leadership, and the education and fiscal outlooks and that type of points. I just found that very, very interesting. Thank you. It has been an honor to have you, join us this morning. The next item on our agenda is the John Brown Best Paper Award announcement. And the division has awarded the 2018-2019 Best Paper to Ms. Shanturi Govender. And the topic of her paper was Ballast of the Future on Heavy Haul Lines, assessing the viability of neo-ballast on the coal line. So just a little background on Shanturi. She graduated from the University of KZN in 2016 with a BSc in Civil Engineering. She Transnet Freight Rail as an engineer in the Rail Network Department. She has published a paper for the International Heavy Haul Association, as well as published an article in the International Railway Journal. She's currently studying towards a MSc in Systems Engineering at the University of Wits. So I'd like to just hand over to Shanturi to take us through her abstract for a couple of minutes before we will proceed to the Q&A session for a couple of minutes thereafter. So over to you, Shanturi, if you could switch your video camera on and just take us through the abstract.
Good day, everyone. All protocols observed, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank SAICE for this award and this honor. As Commissioner said, that my paper, the title of my paper was Ballast of the Future on Heavy Haul Lines and Assessing the Viability of Neo-Ballast on the Coal Line. The abstract of my paper was ballast is a critical element of the superstructure of the track as it maintains the track stability. The maintenance of ballast is frequent and expensive due to its constant degradation and the subsequent loss of track geometry. Neo-ballast is a new innovative ballast aggregate developed by COMSA in Barcelona that is coated with recycled rubber originating from recycled tires. One of the main purposes of this new ballast is to reduce the stiffness of the track as well as to increase the abrasion resistance. Therefore, The study investigated the viability of neo-ballast on the heavy haul lines in South Africa in terms of the mechanical properties based on the minimum required specifications of heavy haul lines as compared to the current ballast on the coal line. The results from the Los Angeles abrasion resistance, the mill abrasion, soundness, and water absorption tests indicated that neo-ballast provided a more abrasion resistance, weathering resistance, and less water absorption as compared to the current coal line ballast. This indicated a reduction in ballast fouling, which will result in a decrease in the ballast layer settlement. Furthermore, neo-ballast indicated to be suitable for the coal line in terms of its mechanical properties. Neo-ballast will lead to a decrease in the deterioration of the track geometry and economic costs of maintenance on heavy haul lines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shanturi, for just taking us through your abstract. I think on behalf of SAICE as well as the Railway and Harbours Division, again, we would like to congratulate you on on the award and a paper well done. And we also look forward to more papers from you in the future as well. So yeah, thank you very much for that, and good luck. I think the next item would be Q&A session. We've got I think 1 or 2 questions, but we don't have a lot of time, so we've just got 5 minutes to address that. So I'm just going to read out a question from posted from Medupi Segwe, and the question relates to our cities are overpopulated and we have a mass movement of people from the rural areas. Is it not more beneficial for South Africa to rather invest in communication infrastructure in the rural areas to create a workforce in the rural areas? So I think, yeah, Mr. Kgobe, maybe that's more aligned to your presentation. If you could just respond on that one, please.
So this is a complex conversation that we've been having in the background, but it goes beyond that. It's about the democratization of digital media. And when you think about it, and you think about, it's not about not allowing people not to move, but allowing access to the level of education that you require in the rural areas to be able to enable people to be able to upgrade their own lives. So let's go back to COVID-19. What COVID-19 has showed us is that those of you that can afford to have a fiber network in their house and all of that, they only send their kids back now when we flatten the curve. But most people forget even rural areas. Just down the road in Alex or in Soweto, they couldn't have the access to be able to have their kids being educated from home. Now, democratization of technology is something that has to happen anyway. And for that matter, the auctioning of spectrum and the TV white space spectrum logic of being able, and the low power network usage. So when you start talking about low power networks, what was the original, 3G network, the 2G network that we had and all of that? What is happening with it now? So that those low power networks can actually be used to be able to zero rate certain things, because it's one thing to give the infrastructure, it's a completely different thing to allow access. Now, that democratization, it's something that I frequently speak about in a lot of conferences, that things like transport, things like health services, you need to zero rate those costs. And when you zero rate those costs, then we're starting the concept of actually being able to democratize technology and the digitization in itself. Now, we are so engrossed in the building work itself that we have forgotten the policies that sit behind everything else. And at the current moment, we're going to end up with a level of policy discontinuity that doesn't work, because all that will happen is as you build more infrastructure, and add more communication infrastructure, you will exacerbate the disparities between those who have and those who have not. So in actual fact, it's a holistic solution rather than us focusing on what do they call it? It's the infrastructure plus the policies, plus the willingness for us to actually be able to use the low-powered network, the new spectrums that are coming out, the TV white spaces that allow us radiuses of even close to 40 kilometers from any tower to be able to broadcast messages that wouldn't necessarily have to go on the 5G network, on the 4G network, and therefore allowing space for people and learning to be able to occur at that level. And I hope I've answered that question because it's much more of a broader conversation than it being about laying out fiber to the rural areas, because we can do more with the actual low power network and the additional spectrum. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kgobe. Mr. Marutla, Mr. Lutchman, is there anything from your side that you would want to add, or is there anything that you'd want to conclude on that question, perhaps?
Thank you, Chairperson. I think Tshepo covered it quite comprehensively, that in the long term, the idea is to integrate via communication ICT, the rural areas with the urban areas as well. There's a lot of documentation that we've put together. As SAICE, we have written articles as well about the importance of integrating the transportation system in our country as well. It doesn't help to develop just the urban areas. So the development of our infrastructure should not just focus on urban areas. It has to be comprehensive enough to even cover the rural areas as well. And I think a lot has been written about that. And I think Tshepo covered that on the ICT space quite comprehensively. Thank you for that, Chairperson.
Thank you for that, Fana. We've noted that there's no further questions. If there's anything else that any of the viewers would like to get more clarity and information on, they could always send an email to ntabaleng@saice.org.za. I've also seen some requests for the presentations as well as the video recording, and that can also be obtained from Ntabaleng. And in addition to that, we will also have a link uploaded on the SAICE Railway and Harbour's web link. So it's www.saicerailyandharbours.co.za. I repeat, it's www.saicerailyandharbours.co.za. Vishaal, I see you online. Is there any concluding comments that you would want to make, perhaps?
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Chairperson. The question around migration is a very interesting one, and it's quite complex because you need to understand why do people and groups move around, and it's part of a greater discussion that has a regional element as well, not just within our geography but outside of our geography as well. For example, in Zimbabwe, the drought, which some are claiming that it's related to climate change and change of weather, and the economic impact of a drought will also cause phenomenon such as migration. And in that case, perhaps having networks and communication doesn't really solve that problem, because there's an economic reason for why one would want to move. And I think as I said, it's complex. So understanding the dynamics of why one moves, I think in part is solved by the technology that helps to some extent. But I think, as I said, we need to look at it holistically in terms of what do people want. There's movements actually away from cities as well. That's happening a lot in the US and in Canada, for example. The peri-urban cost of living is lower than the urban cost of living. So you're finding individuals moving away from city centers into peri-urban and perhaps even rural, because transport systems enable that to happen effectively. So we can, to some extent, decongest cities by having very efficient transport systems, that allow peri-urban lifestyles, and I think that can be something that can happen in the future, for example. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chairperson.